Picture this. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there might be countless other versions of you living slightly different lives. One version chose tea instead of coffee this morning. Another took a different route to work. And perhaps, just perhaps, the version of you from yesterday slipped quietly into this reality while you were sleeping, carrying memories that don't quite match the world around you. What if the life you're living isn't the one you started with? Welcome back to another gentle exploration of the mysteries that surround us. I'm here to guide you through one of the most fascinating questions at the intersection of science and human experience. Tonight, we're drifting into the possibility that reality might be far more fluid than we imagine, and that consciousness itself might be quietly navigating between worlds without our awareness. As always, this is meant to be a calming journey through complex ideas, so feel free to settle in wherever you are. Let your mind wander as we explore together. And if you find these explorations meaningful, a gentle like helps others discover these conversations, and subscribing ensures you won't miss our next journey into the unknown. Now, before we dive deeper, I want to be clear about something important. What we're exploring tonight exists at the fascinating boundary between established science and speculative possibility. While quantum physics has given us remarkable insights into the nature of reality, many of the ideas we'll discuss remain unproven and exist more as thought experiments than confirmed facts. Think of this as an intellectual meditation, a way to stretch our minds and consider what might be possible in a universe far stranger than our everyday experience suggests. To understand how we might slip between realities, we first need to appreciate just how strange reality is at its most fundamental level. Quantum mechanics, the branch of physics that describes the behavior of matter and energy at the smallest scales, reveals a universe that defies our intuitive understanding of how things should work. At the quantum level, particles don't have definite positions until they're observed. They exist in what physicists call superposition, simultaneously occupying multiple states at once. It's as if a coin could be both heads and tails until the moment you look at it. This isn't just a limitation of our measuring instruments, it appears to be a fundamental feature of reality itself. The many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett III in 1957, suggests something even more extraordinary. According to this interpretation, every quantum event that could have multiple outcomes actually produces all possible outcomes, each occurring in its own separate universe. When that quantum coin is flipped, it doesn't just land on heads or tails in our universe. It lands on heads in one universe and tails in another, creating a branching tree of realities that grows more complex with every passing moment. Now, this interpretation remains highly speculative, and there's no scientific consensus on whether it reflects actual reality. But if it's true, the implications are staggering. It would mean that reality is constantly splitting, creating new universes with every quantum interaction. And quantum interactions happen everywhere, all the time, trillions upon trillions of times per second in every atom of your body. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might play a special role in this quantum dance. While most physicists agree that conscious observation isn't necessary for quantum effects to occur, there are theories like cubism or quantum Bayesianism that propose an observer's beliefs about a quantum system could influence the outcomes they observe. This remains a fringe idea in physics, but it opens fascinating questions about the relationship between mind and reality. Take a moment to consider this. As you listen to these words, quantum events are occurring in your brain, in the device you're using, in the air around you. If the many worlds interpretation is correct, each of these events is creating new branches of reality. You might think of it as reality constantly offering you choices, most so subtle that you never notice them consciously. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence that something unusual might be happening with our reality comes from a phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect, named after the widespread false memory that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s rather than in 2013. This effect describes situations where large groups of people share identical false memories about historical facts, product names, or cultural details. The classic example that seems to disturb people most is the children's book series about a family of bears. Many people distinctly remember them being called the Berenstain Bears, spelled with an E. But when they check, they find the books have always been the Berenstain Bears, with an A. The consistency of this memory error across thousands of people is remarkable. Another famous case involves a line from Star Wars. Countless people remember Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father." But when you watch the actual scene, Vader simply says, "No, I am your father." The word Luke is never spoken. Now, mainstream science explains the Mandela Effect through well-understood principles of memory formation and social influence. Our brains don't store memories like video recordings. They reconstruct them each time we recall them, and these reconstructions can be influenced by suggestion, expectation, and social reinforcement. When many people share similar false memories, it's often because they've been exposed to similar sources of misinformation, or because the false version feels more natural or expected than the true one. But here's where it gets interesting from a parallel universe perspective. If realities are constantly branching and merging in ways we don't fully understand, could the Mandela Effect represent something more than just flawed memory? Some speculative theories suggest that these collective false memories might be traces of alternate timelines, breadcrumbs left behind when consciousness shifts from one reality to another. This idea remains completely unproven and highly speculative, but it raises fascinating questions. If you've ever had the eerie experience of remembering something differently than everyone else around you, you might have felt a moment of doubt about the nature of reality itself. Was your memory simply wrong, or were you remembering something from a slightly different version of history? As we explore this speculative territory, it's worth considering what signs might suggest that consciousness occasionally slips between parallel realities. Again, these are not scientifically proven phenomena, but rather patterns that some people report experiencing and interpret as evidence of reality shifting. One of the most commonly reported signs is an increase in synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem too perfectly timed to be random. You think of an old friend, and they call you within hours. You need to find a specific piece of information, and it appears unexpectedly in your social media feed. You keep seeing the same numbers, like 1111, in different contexts throughout your day. From a conventional perspective, synchronicities are often explained by cognitive biases, like the frequency illusion, where we notice things more often once they're on our mind, or confirmation bias, where we remember the hits and forget the misses. But some interpretations suggest that synchronicities might represent moments when our consciousness is more aligned with the flow of a particular reality, or when we're transitioning between timelines where different patterns of cause and effect are at play. Another commonly reported sign is the experience of environmental anomalies. People describe walking through familiar neighborhoods and noticing buildings that seem new, but which everyone insists have always been there. They remember geographical features being in different locations, or stores and restaurants appearing or disappearing without explanation. These experiences are usually dismissed as simple memory errors or lack of attention to gradual changes in our environment. But pause for a moment and consider your own experience. Have you ever had the feeling that something in your environment was subtly different, even though you couldn't put your finger on exactly what had changed? Have you ever walked into a room and felt like the furniture was arranged differently than you remembered, or looked at a familiar street and felt momentarily disoriented? Time distortions represent another category of reported experiences. People describe feeling like they've lost time, or like time has suddenly sped up or slowed down in ways that can't be explained by normal variations in attention or perception. They might arrive somewhere much earlier or later than expected, despite following their usual routine, they might feel like a conversation lasted much longer or shorter than the clock suggests. These temporal anomalies might have conventional explanations related to attention, stress, or neurological factors. But they could also, speculatively speaking, represent moments when consciousness briefly exists in a different timeline with a slightly different temporal flow. To understand how consciousness might navigate between realities, we need to consider what consciousness actually is. This remains one of the deepest mysteries in science. Despite decades of research, we still don't have a complete understanding of how subjective experience arises from the physical processes in our brains. Recent research has begun exploring potential connections between consciousness and quantum mechanics. Some scientists have proposed that consciousness might involve quantum processes in the brain, particularly in structures called microtubules within neurons. This quantum model of consciousness remains highly controversial and is not accepted by most neuroscientists, but it offers intriguing possibilities for how consciousness might interact with the quantum foundations of reality. If consciousness does have quantum properties, it raises the speculative possibility that it might not be as tightly bound to a single timeline as we usually assume. Perhaps consciousness, being a quantum phenomenon, naturally exists in a state of superposition across multiple realities, and what we experience as a single coherent reality is actually the result of consciousness navigating between slightly different timelines. This is purely speculative, but consider the implications. If your consciousness is subtly quantum in nature, it might occasionally find itself more aligned with one timeline than another. The version of you that went to sleep last night might have woken up this morning in a reality that's 99.9% identical to the one you fell asleep in, but with tiny differences that you might never consciously notice. Dreams might play a role in this process. Many people report having vivid dreams that feel different from normal dreams. Dreams that seem to depict alternative versions of their lives where they made different choices or where events unfolded differently. While conventional psychology explains such dreams as the brain processing memories and exploring hypothetical scenarios, some interpretations suggest they might represent glimpses into parallel timelines, where other versions of yourself are living different lives. As you reflect on your own dream experiences, have you ever had dreams that felt unusually real or significant? Dreams where you were living a life that felt completely authentic but was different from your waking life? Dreams that left you with a lingering sense that you had been somewhere else, living as someone else, even if that someone else was still recognizably you. The idea that consciousness might naturally navigate between realities could also explain some of the sudden personality shifts or changes in preferences that people sometimes experience. You might wake up one day with a different taste in music, a new perspective on a relationship, or a sudden interest in a hobby you'd never considered before. Conventionally, we might attribute these changes to normal psychological development or unconscious processing of experiences. But could they sometimes represent moments when your consciousness has aligned more closely with a version of yourself from a slightly different timeline? To understand how parallel realities might exist and interact, we need to explore one of the most fascinating theories in modern cosmology: the idea of bubble universes. According to cosmic inflation theory, the rapid expansion that occurred in the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang didn't happen uniformly throughout space. Instead, it created a vast landscape of bubble universes, each with potentially different physical laws and constants. Theoretical physicist Alexander Vilenkin has described how this process works. Imagine space as being filled with an inflating field that's constantly creating new regions of space. In some areas, this inflation ends, creating a bubble universe like our own. But the process continues elsewhere, creating an infinite number of bubbles, each expanding and evolving independently. What makes this particularly relevant to our discussion is that these bubble universes could have slightly different versions of the same physical laws. the strength of gravity might be marginally different, or the speed of light might vary by tiny amounts. Most of these differences would make life impossible, but in an infinite multiverse, there would also be bubbles very similar to our own, differing only in subtle ways. Now, these bubble universes are supposed to be completely separate from each other, expanding away from one another faster than light itself. But what if, under certain conditions, there could be some form of connection or overlap? This is purely speculative, but it opens the possibility that consciousness, if it has quantum properties that transcend normal space-time, might occasionally sense or even briefly experience these parallel bubbles. String theory adds another layer to this picture. According to string theory, our entire universe might exist on what physicists call a membrane, or brain, floating in higher dimensional space. Other brains might exist nearby, containing their own versions of reality. While these brains typically don't interact, some theories suggest that, under certain conditions, they might come close enough for subtle influences to pass between them. Think of it like this. Imagine you're living inside a soap bubble, and there are countless other soap bubbles floating around you in a space you can't directly perceive. Occasionally, these bubbles might brush against each other so gently that the contact is barely noticeable, but it might create tiny ripples or disturbances that somehow affect the experiences of the beings living inside each bubble. This is all highly speculative, of course, but it provides a theoretical framework for how parallel realities might exist and occasionally influence each other in ways so subtle that we might not consciously recognize them. As you consider these possibilities, take a moment to reflect on the vastness of what we're discussing. If these theories are correct, reality is far larger and more complex than anything our ancestors could have imagined. You're not just living in a universe, you might be living in one small part of an infinite multiverse with countless other versions of reality existing alongside your own. And perhaps, just perhaps, your consciousness is not as confined to this single reality as you might think. Perhaps it occasionally catches glimpses of these other worlds, or briefly aligns with versions of yourself living in subtly different timelines. These moments might be so fleeting and subtle that you experience them as déjà vu, unusual dreams, or simply the sense that something in your world has quietly changed. The journey we're taking together is far from over. In our next exploration, we'll delve deeper into the mechanics of how consciousness might navigate between these realities and examine the specific experiences that might indicate you've already slipped into a parallel universe without realizing it. But for now, simply rest with these possibilities and notice how they might reframe your understanding of the reality you inhabit every day. And if these explorations into the nature of reality intrigue you, you might also be fascinated by another mystery lurking much closer to home. Join me next time as we examine the question, is there a black hole next to Earth? The answer might surprise you and change how you think about the cosmic neighborhood we call home. As we drift deeper into this exploration, let's consider something that might feel both unsettling and strangely comforting. In an infinite universe, or more precisely, in what cosmologists call the level 1 multiverse, you are not alone. Not in the way you might expect. If space extends infinitely in all directions, as many cosmological models suggest, then the observable universe we can see, roughly 93 billion light-years across, represents just one small bubble in an endless cosmic ocean. And in an infinite space filled with matter distributed more or less randomly, the laws of probability lead to a startling conclusion. Patterns must repeat. Think of it this way. There are only so many ways that atoms can be arranged within any given volume of space. The number is astronomically large, but it's still finite. In an infinite universe, every possible arrangement must occur not just once, but infinitely many times. This means that somewhere out there, perhaps unimaginably far away, there's another Earth orbiting another sun, with another version of you living a life nearly identical to your own. But here's where it gets more intriguing. These cosmic doppelgangers wouldn't just be exact copies frozen in time. They would be living, breathing, evolving versions of you, making slightly different choices, experiencing subtly different outcomes. One might have chosen a different career path. Another might have moved to a different city. Some might be so similar to you that the differences are imperceptible, while others might have diverged dramatically based on key decisions made years or decades ago. Now this is purely a mathematical consequence of infinite space combined with finite complexity, not a proven reality, but it invites us to consider something profound about the nature of identity and uniqueness. If there are indeed infinite versions of you scattered across infinite space, what makes the you that's listening to these words special? What makes your consciousness, your stream of experience, the real one? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness itself might provide the answer. Perhaps what we experience as the continuity of self is actually consciousness navigating between these different versions, selecting the timeline that feels most coherent, most consistent with our sense of who we are. This is speculative territory, but it offers a fascinating framework for understanding some of the subtle shifts in reality that people occasionally report. As you sit there now, take a moment to imagine this vast cosmic landscape of selves. Picture countless versions of you, each living in worlds that are almost, but not quite, identical to this one. Some might be listening to slightly different versions of this same video. Others might be reading a book instead, or having a conversation with a friend. The variations could be endless, yet each version would feel just as real, just as authentically you as you do right now. Let's turn our attention to one of the most mysterious aspects of human experience, dreams. Every night, as your conscious mind quiets and your brain shifts into different patterns of activity, you enter realms that feel simultaneously familiar and impossible. In dreams, you can fly, visit places that don't exist, have conversations with people who've passed away, or live out scenarios that your waking mind would recognize as absurd. Conventional neuroscience explains dreams as the brain's way of processing memories, emotions, and random neural activity during sleep. Your brain takes fragments of recent experiences, mixes them with older memories, and weaves them into narratives that can be vivid, emotional, and sometimes startlingly meaningful, even when they make no logical sense. But what if dreams serve another purpose entirely? Some speculative interpretations suggest that during sleep, when the normal constraints of waking consciousness are relaxed, your awareness might occasionally tune into other timelines, other versions of your life, where different choices were made and different paths were taken. Consider the dreams you've had where you were living a completely different life, yet it felt utterly authentic. Perhaps you dreamed of being a musician when you're actually an accountant, or living in a different country with a different family. In the dream, these alternate realities didn't feel like fantasies or wishes. They felt like memories, like glimpses into a life you were actually living somewhere else. This interpretation remains completely unproven and exists more as poetic possibility than scientific fact, but it offers an intriguing lens through which to view some of our most vivid dream experiences. If consciousness has quantum properties that allow it to exist across multiple realities simultaneously, then sleep might represent a state where these normally hidden connections become more accessible. Think about the dreams that have stayed with you long after waking, the ones that felt different from ordinary dreams. They often carry an emotional weight and a sense of significance that's hard to explain. Some people report waking from such dreams with new insights, creative solutions, or shifts in perspective that seem to come from outside their normal thought patterns. Artists, scientists, and inventors throughout history have reported receiving inspiration through dreams. The chemist Auguste Kekule claimed to have discovered the structure of the benzene molecule after dreaming of a snake biting its own tail. Paul McCartney said the melody for Yesterday came to him in a dream, Mary Shelley conceived Frankenstein during what she described as a waking dream. While we might explain these creative breakthroughs as the unconscious mind making novel connections between existing ideas, could they sometimes represent moments when consciousness briefly accesses knowledge or experiences from parallel versions of reality? It's a beautiful thought, even if it remains in the realm of speculation. As you reflect on your own dream life, notice the dreams that feel different, the ones that carry a sense of significance or otherworldliness. Pay attention to moments when you wake with insights or perspectives that seem to have emerged from somewhere beyond your normal thinking patterns. While these experiences likely have conventional explanations, they also offer windows into the mysterious nature of consciousness and its relationship with reality. Now we venture into territory that bridges science and speculation in particularly intriguing ways. Some researchers and practitioners speak of something called quantum jumping, the idea that consciousness might be able to deliberately navigate between parallel realities, selecting timelines that align more closely with desired outcomes or experiences. Before we explore this concept, it's crucial to understand that quantum jumping, as described in popular culture, lacks scientific validation. The term borrows language from quantum physics, but the proposed mechanisms don't align with our current understanding of how quantum systems actually behave. What we're discussing here is more metaphorical framework than proven science. That said, the human experience of sudden shifts in perspective, unexpected opportunities, and seemingly miraculous coincidences does suggest that consciousness might interact with reality in ways we don't fully understand. People often describe moments when their entire life trajectory seemed to shift suddenly, when doors opened that had previously been closed, or when solutions to problems appeared seemingly out of nowhere. From a conventional perspective, these experiences usually result from changes in attention, attitude, and behavior that create new opportunities and possibilities. When you shift your mindset, you begin to notice things you previously overlooked, make connections you hadn't seen before, and take actions that lead to different outcomes. But could there be more to it than that? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might have a role in selecting which of many possible timelines becomes our experienced reality. This idea draws inspiration from interpretations of quantum mechanics that emphasize the role of observation in determining outcomes. Though it's important to note that mainstream physics doesn't support the idea that human consciousness directly influences quantum events on a macroscopic scale. The concept of quantum jumping often involves practices like meditation, visualization, and intention setting. Practitioners report that by clearly envisioning desired outcomes and aligning their thoughts and emotions with those possibilities, they can increase the likelihood of experiencing realities where those outcomes manifest. While this sounds mystical, there are potentially mundane explanations. Visualization and goal setting are well-established tools for achieving desired outcomes. When you clearly define what you want and maintain focused attention on it, you're more likely to notice opportunities, make relevant connections, and take actions that move you toward your goals. This process doesn't require any quantum mechanical explanations. Simple psychology and neuroscience can account for much of it. Yet something intriguing remains. Many people who practice these techniques report experiences that feel like more than just improved focus and motivation. They describe synchronicities that seem too perfectly timed to be coincidental, unexpected encounters that provide exactly what they need when they need it, and sudden shifts in circumstances that appear to have emerged from nowhere. Perhaps what we call quantum jumping is really the art of learning to navigate the subtle currents of possibility that flow through our lives. By becoming more aware of the choices available to us in each moment, and more intentional about which choices we make, we might indeed be selecting which timeline we experience, even if the mechanism is psychological rather than quantum mechanical. Take a breath here and consider your own life. Have you ever experienced periods when everything seemed to flow effortlessly, when opportunities appeared just when you needed them, when the right people entered your life at the perfect moments. Conversely, have you noticed times when you felt stuck, when doors seemed to close no matter which way you turned, when circumstances conspired to maintain the status quo? These patterns might reflect something as simple as changes in your attention and behaviour, or they might point to something more mysterious about how consciousness interacts with the field of possibilities that surrounds us at every moment. The truth likely combines both explanations in ways we're only beginning to understand. As we near the end of our journey together tonight, let's explore the subtle indicators that might suggest you've already experienced reality shifts without recognizing them. These signs exist in the liminal space between scientific observation and subjective experience, and they invite us to pay closer attention to the texture of our daily lives. One of the most commonly reported indicators is a sudden change in personal preferences or interests that seems to emerge from nowhere. You might wake up one morning with a completely different taste in music, find yourself drawn to books you'd never considered reading, or feel an unexpected pull toward activities you'd previously ignored. While personal growth and changing interests are normal parts of human development, sometimes these shifts feel more dramatic and inexplicable. Another sign that people report is the experience of enhanced intuition or an increased sense of flow in daily life. Decisions that once felt difficult become clear and obvious. You find yourself in the right place at the right time, with surprising frequency. Conversations with strangers lead to exactly the information or connections you need. Traffic lights seem to turn green just as you approach them, and parking spaces appear precisely when you need them. From a conventional perspective, these experiences might reflect changes in attention and awareness. When you're more present and mindful, you naturally notice more opportunities and make better decisions. But some interpretations suggest they might also indicate that you've shifted into a timeline where the flow of events is more aligned with your intentions and needs. Changes in relationships often accompany reported reality shifts. People you've known for years might seem subtly different, displaying personality traits or expressing opinions you don't remember them having before. Sometimes these changes feel positive, as if difficult relationships have somehow become more harmonious. Other times, you might feel a growing disconnect from people who once felt close. This phenomenon could simply reflect the natural evolution of relationships and the ways people change over time. But it might also suggest that in navigating between timelines, you occasionally find yourself in realities where your relationships have developed along slightly different trajectories. Physical changes in your environment represent another category of reported signs. You might notice that familiar routes seem different, that buildings appear to have changed overnight, or that the layout of spaces you know well feels somehow altered. Usually, these observations can be explained by simple inattention to gradual changes, construction projects, or the fallibility of memory. Yet sometimes the changes feel too dramatic or sudden to explain away so easily. People report returning to childhood neighbourhoods and finding that streets they remember clearly simply don't exist, or discovering that local landmarks they have strong memories of visiting were supposedly never there at all. The experience of temporal anomalies also appears frequently in accounts of reality shifting. Time might seem to move differently than usual. A conversation that felt like it lasted for hours turns out to have taken only minutes. A journey that usually takes a specific amount of time is completed much faster or slower than expected, despite following the same route and encountering similar conditions. These time distortions might result from variations in attention, stress levels, or neurological factors, but they could also potentially indicate brief experiences in timelines where the flow of events unfolds at different paces. Most intriguingly, many people report an overall sense that reality has become more malleable, more responsive to their thoughts and intentions. They describe feeling like active participants in creating their experience rather than passive recipients of whatever circumstances happen to arise. This shift in perspective often coincides with increased synchronicities, improved outcomes, and a general sense that life is flowing more smoothly. Whether these changes reflect genuine reality shifts or simply the psychological effects of paying closer attention to the nature of experience, they point to something important about human consciousness and its relationship with the world around us. They remind us that reality might be far more interactive and participatory than we usually assume. As you consider these various signs and indicators, reflect on your own experience. Have you noticed periods in your life when everything seemed to shift subtly but significantly? Times when your preferences changed, your relationships evolved in unexpected ways, or your environment felt somehow different? Moments when reality seemed more responsive to your intentions and desires? These experiences might have perfectly conventional explanations, or they might represent something more mysterious about the nature of consciousness and its navigation through the landscape of possibility. Either way, they invite us to remain curious about the deepest mysteries of existence and our role in shaping the reality we experience. Our exploration tonight has taken us through quantum foundations and cosmic infinities, through dreams and shifting timelines, through the speculative territories where science meets the mystery of consciousness itself. We've considered the possibility that reality might be far more fluid than we usually imagine, and that you might already be navigating between parallel universes in ways so subtle that they escape conscious notice. Whether or not these ideas reflect literal truth, they offer a profound invitation to remain awake to the mystery and magic that might be flowing through every moment of your existence. They remind us that consciousness itself remains one of the deepest puzzles in science, and that our relationship with reality might be far more participatory and creative than we've been taught to believe. As we settle deeper into these contemplations, let's explore something that might feel both intimate and cosmic. The idea that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, but participates in it in ways we're only beginning to understand. This isn't about magical thinking or wishful manifestation, but rather about the subtle ways that awareness itself might interact with the quantum foundations of existence. Recent research in quantum biology has revealed that quantum effects play crucial roles in biological processes we once thought were purely classical. Photosynthesis in plants appears to use quantum coherence to achieve remarkable efficiency in energy transfer. Some birds may navigate using quantum entanglement in specialized proteins in their eyes. Even the process of smell might involve quantum tunneling effects that help us distinguish between different molecular vibrations. These discoveries suggest that the boundary between the quantum world and the biological world isn't as clear-cut as we once believed. If quantum effects are operating in biological systems, including potentially in the neural networks of our brains, then consciousness might have access to quantum information processing in ways we're only beginning to explore. Some interpretations suggest that meditation and contemplative practices might enhance our sensitivity to these quantum processes. When you quiet the constant chatter of analytical thinking and enter states of deep awareness, you might be creating conditions where more subtle forms of information processing can emerge. This remains highly speculative, but it offers an intriguing framework for understanding why contemplative traditions have consistently reported experiences that seem to transcend ordinary perception. Take a moment now to notice your own state of awareness as you listen to these ideas. How does your consciousness feel when it's not actively trying to analyze or categorize what it's experiencing? In those quiet spaces between thoughts, what kind of information might be available that normally gets drowned out by mental activity? This isn't to suggest that meditation grants supernatural powers or allows direct manipulation of quantum systems. Rather, it's to consider that consciousness might naturally have access to more information than we typically recognize, and that practices which cultivate deeper awareness might help us notice patterns and connections that were always present but previously overlooked. The concept of quantum coherence offers another lens through which to view consciousness and its relationship with reality. In quantum systems, coherence refers to the ability of particles to maintain synchronized wave-like properties across space and time. When coherence is lost, through interaction with the environment, the system becomes classical and predictable. Some researchers have proposed that consciousness might involve maintaining coherence across neural networks in ways that allow for non-local information processing. This would mean that your awareness isn't just localized to your brain, but might have access to information from a broader field of possibilities. Again, this remains speculative, but it suggests that consciousness might be fundamentally more expansive than our usual sense of being contained within our individual minds. Consider how this might relate to the experiences of interconnectedness that people often report during deep meditation or contemplative states. Rather than being mere subjective feelings, these experiences might reflect genuine access to more extended forms of consciousness that transcend individual boundaries. The sense of being connected to something larger than yourself might not be metaphorical, but rather a direct perception of the quantum field that underlies all existence. Now we arrive at one of the most profound implications of quantum mechanics for understanding consciousness and reality. The measurement problem in quantum physics reveals that the act of observation plays a fundamental role in determining which of many possible outcomes becomes actualized. While this doesn't mean that human consciousness is required for quantum events to occur, it does suggest that observation itself is woven into the fabric of reality in mysterious ways. When we extend this insight to the scale of human experience, fascinating possibilities emerge. If consciousness is indeed quantum in nature, then the quality of your attention, the depth of your awareness, and the subtlety of your perception might influence which aspects of reality become most apparent to you. Not in a magical sense of creating reality through wishful thinking, but in the more nuanced sense of selecting which possibilities you become aligned with. This interpretation suggests that consciousness might work like a quantum antenna, naturally resonating with certain frequencies of possibility while remaining less sensitive to others. Just as a radio can be tuned to different stations that exist simultaneously in the electromagnetic spectrum, your awareness might be capable of tuning into different layers of reality that coexist in the quantum field. The practices that contemplative traditions have developed over millennia might be understood as technologies for refining this tuning process. When you cultivate mindfulness, you develop the ability to observe without immediately categorizing or judging what you perceive. When you practice loving kindness, you might be aligning your consciousness with timelines where compassion and connection are more prominent. When you engage in inquiry into the nature of self and reality, you might be opening to dimensions of existence that are normally hidden by conceptual thinking. None of this requires abandoning scientific rigor or embracing magical thinking. Instead, it invites us to consider that consciousness might be a more sophisticated instrument than we've typically assumed, capable of interfacing with reality in ways that our current scientific paradigms are only beginning to explore. As you sit with these ideas, notice how they feel in your body and awareness. Do they resonate with something you've sensed but never quite articulated? Do they help make sense of experiences you've had that seem to transcend ordinary cause and effect? Or do they feel too speculative, too removed from the concrete reality you know? Your response to these concepts is itself interesting data. If consciousness does operate as a kind of quantum interface with reality, then your intuitive sense of what feels true or meaningful might be providing information that analytical thinking alone cannot access. As our exploration draws toward a gentle close, let's consider what it might mean to live with an awareness of these possibilities. Whether or not consciousness literally navigates between parallel universes, the framework we've explored tonight offers a profound invitation to engage with reality more consciously and creatively. If reality is indeed far more participatory than we usually assume, then every moment becomes an opportunity to choose which possibility you align with. Not through force or manipulation, but through the quality of attention and intention you bring to your experience. This might explain why contemplative practices often lead to what seem like miraculous changes in people's lives, not because they've gained supernatural powers, but because they've learned to work more skillfully with the quantum field of possibility that surrounds us always. The signs we discussed earlier, the synchronicities and shifts that might indicate reality navigation, become invitations to pay closer attention to the subtle dynamics of consciousness and choice. Whether you interpret them as evidence of parallel universe shifting or as the natural result of increased awareness and intentionality, they point toward the same practical wisdom: that consciousness is not passive, but actively participates in shaping the reality it experiences. This understanding doesn't require you to believe in any particular theory or interpretation. It simply invites you to experiment with bringing greater awareness to your daily experience. Notice the moments when reality seems more fluid, more responsive, more alive with possibility. Pay attention to the quality of your attention itself and how it might influence what you perceive and experience. Perhaps most importantly, remain curious about the mystery of consciousness and its relationship with the world around you. Science continues to reveal new layers of strangeness in the quantum foundations of reality, and contemplative exploration continues to uncover new depths in the nature of awareness itself. The intersection of these two domains of inquiry promises discoveries that might transform our understanding of what it means to be conscious beings in a quantum universe. As you move through the coming days, you might find yourself more sensitive to the subtle textures of experience, more aware of the choices that present themselves in each moment, more curious about the relationship between your inner state and the outer circumstances you encounter. Whether or not you've already slipped into parallel universes without realizing it, you now have a framework for recognizing the signs and perhaps, just perhaps, for navigating these shifts more consciously. The universe you inhabit is stranger and more wonderful than our ancestors could have imagined, and consciousness itself remains one of its deepest mysteries. In exploring the possibility that you might be quietly navigating between realities, we've touched on some of the most profound questions about the nature of existence itself. As we continue our gentle drift through these profound territories, let's explore something that might feel both scientifically grounded and mysteriously elusive. The idea that awareness itself might have layers, depths, and dimensions that we're only beginning to map. This isn't about mystical realms or supernatural abilities, but rather about the possibility that consciousness operates with far more sophistication than our everyday experience typically reveals. Consider for a moment how your attention works. Right now, as you listen to these words, your awareness is focused on the sound of my voice and the meaning being conveyed. But simultaneously, other layers of awareness are operating in the background. You might be peripherally aware of sounds in your environment, the feeling of your body settling into rest, perhaps even subtle emotions or thoughts that drift through your mind without demanding full attention. Neuroscientists have identified multiple networks in the brain that operate simultaneously, processing different types of information at varying levels of conscious access. The default mode network becomes active during rest and introspection, weaving together memories, possibilities, and self-referential thoughts. The salience network determines which inputs deserve focused attention. The executive control network manages complex cognitive tasks and decision-making. What's particularly intriguing is that these networks don't operate in isolation. They're constantly communicating, integrating information, and shifting dominance based on what the moment requires. Your consciousness isn't a single spotlight of awareness, but rather more like a symphony of interconnected processes, each contributing to the rich tapestry of your subjective experience. Recent research in consciousness studies has revealed that much of what we consider conscious processing actually occurs below the threshold of awareness. Your brain makes decisions, processes emotional information, and even initiates actions before your conscious mind recognizes what's happening. This suggests that consciousness, as we typically experience it, might be more like the tip of an iceberg, with vast depths of processing occurring beneath the surface. Some interpretations suggest that these deeper layers of consciousness might be more sensitive to subtle patterns and connections than our surface awareness typically recognizes. When you have an intuitive sense about a situation, or when you suddenly understand something that couldn't be reasoned through logically, you might be accessing information that these deeper networks have been processing outside of conscious awareness. Take a breath here and notice the quality of your attention as you absorb these ideas. Can you sense the different layers of awareness operating simultaneously within you? The focused attention on these words, the broader awareness of your environment, perhaps even subtler senses of meaning or resonance that seem to emerge from somewhere beyond analytical thinking. This multi-layered nature of consciousness might help explain some of the phenomena we've been exploring tonight. If awareness operates across multiple dimensions simultaneously, then what we experience as sudden shifts in reality or unexpected synchronicities might sometimes reflect the deeper layers of consciousness, detecting patterns that haven't yet reached conscious recognition. Now, let's venture into territory that bridges scientific observation with contemplative insight in particularly fascinating ways. The concept that consciousness might operate through resonance, naturally aligning with certain frequencies of possibility while remaining less attuned to others. This isn't about mystical vibrations, but rather about the well-documented phenomenon of resonance that appears throughout physical systems. In physics, resonance occurs when one system's natural frequency matches another's, creating amplification and synchronization. A tuning fork struck near a piano will cause the corresponding piano string to vibrate. Radio antennas are designed to resonate with specific electromagnetic frequencies, filtering the desired signals from the vast spectrum of waves passing through space. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might operate according to similar principles, naturally resonating with certain patterns of information while filtering out others. This could help explain why different people seem to inhabit subtly different versions of reality, not because they're literally in parallel universes, but because their consciousness naturally attunes to different aspects of the vast field of information and possibility that surrounds us. Consider how this might manifest in your own experience. Have you ever noticed that when you're in a particularly positive or open state of mind, you seem to encounter more kindness, more opportunities, more moments of unexpected beauty? Conversely, when you're anxious or closed off, do difficult situations seem to proliferate around you? While these patterns might be explained by confirmation bias, changes in behavior, or selective attention, they might also reflect something more subtle about how consciousness interfaces with the world. If awareness does operate through resonance, then your internal state could influence which aspects of reality you naturally detect and align with. This isn't to suggest that positive thinking magically creates positive outcomes, or that individuals are responsible for all the circumstances they encounter. Life includes challenges, difficulties, and random events that no amount of positive resonance can prevent. Rather, it's to consider that consciousness might have more agency in selecting which possibilities receive attention and energy than we typically recognize. Meditation traditions have long recognized that the quality of awareness itself can be cultivated and refined. Practices like mindfulness don't just help you notice what's happening more clearly, they might also help you develop more skillful ways of engaging with the patterns and possibilities that are always flowing through your experience. When you cultivate loving kindness, you might be training your consciousness to resonate more readily with opportunities for connection and compassion. When you practice equanimity, you might be developing the ability to remain centered and responsive, even when encountering difficult circumstances. These aren't just psychological skills, they might represent ways of tuning the resonance frequency of awareness itself. As you consider these possibilities, notice what happens in your own awareness. Do certain ideas or frameworks feel more resonant, more alive with possibility than others? This isn't about deciding what's true based on how it feels, but rather about recognizing that your response to ideas might provide information about how consciousness naturally orients toward different patterns of understanding. Let's explore something that happens countless times throughout your day, yet rarely receives conscious attention. The process of making choices and how these seemingly simple acts might connect to the deeper structures of reality itself. Every moment presents you with options, most so subtle you never consciously recognize them. Which thoughts to follow, which emotions to engage with, which actions to take, even which aspects of your environment to notice. From a conventional perspective, decision-making involves weighing options, considering consequences, and selecting the choice that best serves your goals and values. Neuroscience has mapped many of the brain regions involved in this process, showing how different networks contribute to evaluation, comparison, and final selection. But quantum mechanics introduces a fascinating wrinkle to this picture. At the most fundamental level, quantum systems exist in superposition until a measurement or interaction forces them to collapse into a definite state. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might operate according to similar principles, existing in a state of potential until the moment of choice crystallizes a particular possibility into experience. This remains highly speculative, but it offers an intriguing framework for understanding the relationship between consciousness and reality. If awareness does have quantum properties, then each moment of choice might represent a quantum collapse of sorts, selecting one timeline from among many possible futures. Consider how this might feel from the inside. Have you ever stood at a crossroads in your life, sensing that multiple possible futures were somehow present simultaneously, waiting to be actualized? These moments often carry a particular quality of aliveness, as if reality itself were holding its breath, ready to unfold in whatever direction your choice might lead. This interpretation doesn't require believing that consciousness directly manipulates quantum systems on a macroscopic scale. Rather, it suggests that the process of choosing might naturally align consciousness with certain trajectories of possibility, while allowing others to fade into the background of unrealized potential. The implications are profound. If each choice you make represents a kind of quantum collapse, selecting one reality from among many possibilities, then you might be far more active in shaping your experience than you typically recognize. Not in a magical sense of controlling external circumstances, but in the more subtle sense of determining which aspects of reality receive your attention, energy, and engagement. Take a moment to reflect on a recent decision you made, perhaps something as simple as choosing what to have for breakfast or which route to take to work. Can you sense the other possibilities that were available in that moment? The different versions of your day that might have unfolded based on different choices? While you can never know what those alternate timelines might have contained, the very act of choosing seems to navigate consciousness toward one particular unfolding of events. This perspective invites a more conscious relationship with the process of choice itself. Rather than making decisions automatically or reactively, you might pause to sense the field of possibilities present in any given moment. Not to become paralyzed by endless options, but to recognize that each choice carries the power to shape the trajectory of your experience in ways both subtle and profound. As we drift deeper into these contemplations, let's explore one of the most mysterious aspects of human experience. Those moments when the world seems to orchestrate itself in ways that feel too meaningful to be mere coincidence. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they call you that same day. You need specific information, and it appears unexpectedly in a conversation you overhear. You keep encountering the same numbers, symbols, or phrases in different contexts until their repeated appearance feels like a message. Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe these meaningful coincidences, suggesting that they represent moments when the inner psychological state aligns with outer events in ways that transcend ordinary cause and effect. While conventional psychology often explains synchronicities as the result of selective attention and pattern recognition, they continue to fascinate researchers and experiencers alike because of their uncanny timing and relevance. From a quantum perspective, some interpretations suggest that synchronicities might represent moments when consciousness becomes more coherently aligned with the underlying information field that connects all things. If reality is fundamentally interconnected at the quantum level, as phenomena like entanglement suggest, then perhaps consciousness can occasionally detect these hidden connections in ways that manifest as meaningful coincidences. This remains purely speculative, but it offers a framework for understanding why synchronicities often seem to increase during times of transition, heightened awareness, or deep contemplation. These states might create conditions where consciousness becomes more sensitive to the subtle patterns and connections that normally operate below the threshold of perception. Notice in your own life when synchronicities seem most likely to occur. Are there particular states of mind or being that seem to invite these meaningful coincidences? Many people report that synchronicities increase when they're feeling more open, present, or aligned with their deeper sense of purpose. Others notice them more frequently, during periods of uncertainty, as if the universe were offering guidance when it's most needed. Rather than trying to force synchronicities to occur, which tends to create the kind of grasping that interferes with their natural emergence, consider approaching them with curiosity and appreciation when they do arise. They might not represent direct messages from the universe, but they can serve as invitations to pay closer attention to the interconnected nature of existence and your place within it. The beauty of synchronicities lies not necessarily in their supernatural significance, but in their capacity to remind us that we're part of something larger than our individual lives. They point toward the possibility that consciousness and world are more intimately connected than our usual sense of separation suggests. Whether they arise from quantum coherence, psychological pattern recognition, or something else entirely, they invite us to remain open to the mystery and magic that might be woven through even the most ordinary moments. As you move through your days following our exploration tonight, you might find yourself more attuned to these moments of meaningful coincidence, not seeking them compulsively, but remaining receptive to their appearance and curious about what they might reveal about the nature of consciousness and its relationship with the world. Let's turn our attention now to something that might fundamentally shift how you understand your place in the web of existence. The possibility that consciousness doesn't exist in isolation, but rather participates in what we might call an ecology of awareness that extends far beyond individual minds. This isn't about telepathy or supernatural connection, but rather about the scientifically documented ways that consciousness appears to be inherently relational and interconnected. Mirror neurons in the brain fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. This neural mirroring creates a kind of embodied empathy, allowing you to understand others' experiences by literally simulating them in your own nervous system. Emotional contagion demonstrates how feelings can spread between people without conscious communication, as when you walk into a room and immediately sense tension or joy without anyone speaking. Research in social psychology has revealed that individual consciousness is far more influenced by collective dynamics than we typically recognize. Your thoughts, emotions, and decisions are constantly being shaped by subtle social cues, shared cultural narratives, and the emotional climate of the groups you participate in. This suggests that what we experience as individual awareness might be more accurately understood as individual participation in larger fields of consciousness. Some interpretations extend this insight to suggest that consciousness might exist as a kind of field phenomenon, similar to electromagnetic or gravitational fields. Just as objects with mass create distortions in space-time that we experience as gravity, perhaps conscious beings create distortions in what we might call the consciousness field, influencing the awareness of others in subtle but measurable ways. This remains highly speculative and lacks scientific consensus, but it offers an intriguing framework for understanding some of the phenomena we've been exploring. If consciousness does operate as a field phenomenon, then the quality of your awareness might influence not just your own experience, but contribute to the collective field of consciousness that surrounds and includes you. Consider how this might manifest in your daily life. Have you ever noticed that spending time with certain people seems to elevate your own state of awareness, making you feel more present, creative, or peaceful? Conversely, have you experienced how exposure to anxiety, negativity, or unconsciousness in others can affect your own mental and emotional state? These effects might result from purely psychological mechanisms like emotional contagion and social modeling, but they might also reflect something more fundamental about the relational nature of consciousness itself. If awareness exists as a field phenomenon, then cultivating greater presence, compassion, and wisdom in yourself might contribute to the well-being of the larger field in ways that extend beyond your immediate interactions. This understanding carries both empowerment and responsibility. If consciousness is indeed relational and field-like in nature, then your inner work doesn't just benefit you personally, it contributes to the collective evolution of awareness itself. The meditation you practice, the compassion you cultivate, the wisdom you develop, all might ripple outward in ways that influence the quality of consciousness available to others. Take a breath here and sense into this possibility. Can you feel yourself not just as an isolated individual, but as a unique expression of something larger, participating in an ecology of awareness that includes all conscious beings? This doesn't diminish your individuality or personal agency. Rather, it places both within a larger context of interconnection and mutual influence. As we approach the culmination of tonight's journey, let's explore what it might mean to live with conscious awareness of the possibilities we've been discussing. Whether or not consciousness literally navigates between parallel universes, the framework we've explored offers profound insights for engaging more skillfully with the reality you inhabit. If reality is indeed more participatory and responsive than conventional thinking suggests, then every moment becomes an opportunity to choose how you engage with the field of possibilities that surrounds you. This isn't about trying to control outcomes or manipulate circumstances, but rather about bringing greater awareness to the quality of attention and intention you contribute to each situation. The practices that contemplative traditions have developed over millennia might be understood as technologies for refining this navigation process. Mindfulness cultivates the ability to remain present with whatever is arising without immediately reacting or trying to change it. This creates space for more conscious responses rather than automatic reactions, potentially aligning you with more skillful possibilities. Compassion practices might attune your consciousness to timelines where connection and kindness are more prominent. Not because loving kindness magically transforms difficult people or situations, but because it orients your awareness toward opportunities for understanding, forgiveness, and constructive engagement that might otherwise go unnoticed. Inquiry practices that explore the nature of self and reality might open consciousness to dimensions of existence that are normally hidden by habitual patterns of thinking and perceiving. When you question fundamental assumptions about who you are and how reality works, you create space for new possibilities to emerge. None of these practices require believing in parallel universes or quantum consciousness. They work perfectly well within conventional understanding of psychology and neuroscience, but the framework we've explored tonight suggests they might also represent ways of learning to navigate more consciously through the quantum field of possibility that underlies all experience. The key insight isn't that you can control reality through consciousness, but rather that consciousness might be far more active in selecting which aspects of reality you engage with than you typically recognize. By bringing greater awareness to this selection process, you might discover that you have more agency in shaping your experience than you previously imagined. This doesn't mean that all circumstances are within your control, or that difficult experiences can be avoided through proper consciousness navigation. Life includes challenges, losses, and situations that no amount of awareness can prevent. But it does suggest that you might have more choice in how you engage with whatever circumstances arise, and that this choice might influence which possibilities become most prominent in your experience. As you integrate these insights into your daily life, you might experiment with bringing greater consciousness to moments of choice and transition. Before making decisions, you could pause to sense the field of possibilities present in that moment. When encountering challenging situations, you might ask what opportunities for growth or understanding might be hidden within the difficulty. Most importantly, you might cultivate curiosity about the mystery of consciousness itself and its relationship with the reality you inhabit. Science continues to reveal new depths in both quantum mechanics and neuroscience, and contemplative exploration continues to uncover new dimensions of awareness. The intersection of these domains promises discoveries that might transform our understanding of what it means to be conscious beings in a quantum universe. As we drift further into this exploration, let's consider something that might feel both unsettling and profoundly illuminating. The possibility that memory itself isn't the stable recording system we imagine it to be, but rather something more fluid, more participatory in the construction of reality than we've been taught to believe. This isn't about the fallibility of human recollection, which neuroscience has well documented, but something more mysterious about how consciousness might interface with the information structures that define our experience of continuity and identity. Every time you remember something, your brain doesn't simply retrieve a stored file like a computer accessing data. Instead, it reconstructs that memory from fragments distributed across neural networks, weaving together sensory details, emotional tones, and contextual information into something that feels like a coherent recollection. This reconstruction process is inherently creative, influenced by your current emotional state, recent experiences, and even subtle environmental cues you're not consciously aware of. But here's where it becomes particularly intriguing. Some interpretations suggest that this reconstructive process might occasionally access information from sources beyond your individual neural networks. If consciousness does have quantum properties that transcend ordinary space-time boundaries, then the act of remembering might sometimes tap into what we could metaphorically call a broader field of information, retrieving details that feel authentic but don't quite match the consensus version of events. This remains highly speculative, but it offers a framework for understanding those moments when your memory feels completely certain about something that apparently never happened the way you remember it. Rather than simply dismissing these experiences as memory errors, we might consider them as potential glimpses into the complex relationship between consciousness and information itself. Take a moment to reflect on your own relationship with memory. Have you ever had the experience of remembering an event so vividly that you could describe it in detail, only to discover that others who were present recall it differently, or that evidence suggests it unfolded in ways that contradict your recollection? These moments can be deeply disorienting, challenging not just your confidence in a particular memory, but your sense of the reliability of memory itself. Most of the time, these discrepancies have straightforward explanations rooted in the reconstructive nature of memory and the ways our brains fill in gaps with plausible details. But occasionally, the discrepancies feel different, more systematic, as if your memory were drawing from a slightly different version of events entirely. Now let's explore something that happens so constantly we rarely notice it, yet it might hold keys to understanding the deepest mysteries of consciousness and reality. The phenomenon of temporal perception and how your subjective experience of time seems to flow at different rates depending on various factors that remain poorly understood. You've undoubtedly noticed that time feels elastic. When you're deeply engaged in an activity you love, hours can pass in what feels like minutes. When you're bored or anxious, minutes can stretch into what feels like hours. During emergencies or moments of intense focus, time might seem to slow down dramatically, allowing you to perceive and respond to details that would normally blur past your awareness. Neuroscience has identified some of the mechanisms behind these temporal distortions. Different brain regions track time at different scales, from milliseconds to hours to days. The neurotransmitter dopamine plays crucial roles in temporal perception, which is why conditions that affect dopamine levels can dramatically alter how time feels. Attention and emotional arousal also influence temporal processing in ways that can stretch or compress subjective time. But something mysterious remains about the deepest nature of temporal experience. Einstein's relativity showed us that time isn't absolute, but relative to the observer's frame of reference. At very high speeds or in strong gravitational fields, time literally runs differently. While these effects are negligible in everyday life, they raise profound questions about the nature of time itself and how consciousness might interface with it. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might have a more dynamic relationship with temporal flow than we typically recognize. If awareness does have quantum properties, it might occasionally experience brief desynchronizations from the normal temporal flow, creating those strange moments when time feels fundamentally different than usual. Consider your own experiences with temporal anomalies. Have you ever had the sensation of missing time, arriving somewhere much earlier or later than expected despite following your usual routine? Have you experienced moments when a conversation or activity seemed to last much longer or shorter than clock suggested? These experiences might have conventional neurological explanations, but they also point toward the mysterious relationship between consciousness and time. As you settle deeper into contemplation tonight, notice the quality of temporal experience itself. How does time feel right now as you listen to these words? Can you sense the way your awareness naturally expands and contracts, sometimes focused narrowly on immediate details, sometimes opening to broader patterns and connections? This flexibility of temporal awareness might offer clues about consciousness's deeper nature and its relationship with the fabric of reality itself. Let's explore something that bridges individual consciousness with larger patterns of collective awareness. The possibility that groups of people can sometimes become coherent in ways that transcend ordinary communication and social influence, creating shared experiences that seem to emerge from deeper levels of connection. Research in social psychology has documented numerous examples of collective coherence that go beyond simple social contagion. Groups working on creative problems sometimes reach insights simultaneously, even when individual members are working independently. Audiences at musical performances or theatrical events can become synchronized in ways that create palpable shifts in the collective energy of the space. Teams of meditators practicing together often report experiences of shared awareness that feel qualitatively different from individual practice. These phenomena might be explained through conventional mechanisms like subtle nonverbal communication, shared cultural frameworks, and synchronized brainwave patterns that occur when people engage in similar activities together. But some interpretations suggest They might also reflect something more fundamental about the interconnected nature of consciousness itself. If awareness does operate as a field phenomenon, as some speculative theories suggest, then groups of conscious beings might occasionally achieve states of coherence where individual boundaries become more permeable, allowing for shared access to insights, emotions, and even sensory experiences. This remains unproven and exists more as metaphorical framework than scientific fact, but it offers an intriguing lens for understanding some of the more mysterious aspects of collective human experience. Think about your own experiences of being part of groups that felt unusually connected or synchronized, perhaps during collaborative creative work, shared meditation practice, or even spontaneous moments of connection with strangers. These experiences often carry a particular quality of aliveness and meaning that's difficult to describe, but unmistakable when it occurs. Whether these moments reflect genuine field effects or simply the beautiful complexity of human social psychology, they point towards something important about consciousness and its inherently relational nature. They remind us that awareness doesn't exist in isolation, but emerges from and contributes to larger webs of connection that extend far beyond individual minds. As you consider these possibilities, notice how it feels to imagine consciousness as fundamentally interconnected rather than separate. Does this perspective shift your sense of identity or responsibility? Does it change how you think about your own inner work and its potential impact on the larger world? As we continue our gentle exploration, let's return to the mysterious realm of dreams with deeper appreciation for their potential role in consciousness navigation. While we touched on dreams earlier, there are layers of complexity worth exploring more thoroughly, particularly around the question of whether dream experiences might sometimes represent something more than random neural processing during sleep. Sleep researchers have mapped the different stages of sleep and identified the neural correlates of dreaming, but the actual experience of dreaming remains profoundly mysterious. During REM sleep, your brain becomes almost as active as during waking hours, yet your body is temporarily paralyzed. Your eyes dart rapidly beneath closed lids, as if tracking the movements of dream figures across invisible landscapes. What's particularly intriguing is the quality of certain dreams that feel distinctly different from the usual jumble of memories and imagination. These are dreams with unusual coherence, emotional intensity, or informational content that seems to come from beyond your normal knowledge or experience. Dreams where you understand concepts you've never studied, speak languages you don't know, or navigate environments with impossible geometries that nonetheless feel completely logical within the dream state. Some interpretations suggest that during sleep, when the normal constraints of waking consciousness are relaxed, awareness might become more sensitive to subtle information patterns that are normally filtered out. If consciousness does have access to broader fields of information, as some speculative theories propose, then dreams might represent a natural laboratory where this expanded access becomes more apparent. This doesn't mean that all dreams carry profound significance or hidden messages. Most dreams are probably exactly what conventional neuroscience suggests: the brain processing memories, emotions, and random neural activity during sleep. But the dreams that feel different, that carry unusual clarity or impossible knowledge, might deserve closer attention as potential windows into consciousness's deeper capacities. Pay attention to your own dream experiences in the days following our exploration tonight. Notice which dreams fade quickly upon waking and which ones linger with unusual vividness or emotional resonance. Notice dreams that seem to offer solutions to problems you've been working on, or perspectives on situations that feel wiser than your waking analysis. Rather than trying to interpret dreams symbolically or mystically, simply observe them as data about the nature of consciousness itself. What do they suggest about the mind's capacity to create coherent experiences from seemingly random inputs? What do they reveal about the relationship between identity and awareness when the usual boundaries of self become fluid. Now we venture into territory that might feel both deeply abstract and surprisingly practical: the measurement problem in quantum mechanics, and what it might reveal about consciousness's role in determining which possibilities become actualized experiences. This isn't about magical thinking or the idea that human consciousness controls quantum events, but rather about the mysterious relationship between observation and reality that quantum physics has revealed. In the quantum realm, systems exist in superposition until something interacts with them in a way that forces them to choose a definite state. This interaction doesn't have to involve conscious observers. Any sufficiently complex environment can cause what physicists call decoherence, where quantum superpositions collapse into classical, definite states. However, the exact mechanism by which this collapse occurs remains one of the most debated questions in physics. Different interpretations offer different explanations, from many world scenarios where all possibilities occur in parallel universes, to dynamical collapse theories where wave functions spontaneously collapse according to precise mathematical rules. What makes this relevant to our exploration is that consciousness itself seems to straddle the boundary between quantum and classical realms. Your brain operates through classical neural networks, yet these networks depend on quantum mechanical processes at the molecular level. The question of how subjective experience emerges from objective physical processes remains one of the deepest unsolved problems in science. Some speculative interpretations suggest that consciousness might represent a natural measurement apparatus, not in the sense of directly causing quantum collapses, but rather in the sense of being naturally sensitive to the information patterns that emerge when quantum systems interact with their environments. This would mean that awareness might be fundamentally about detecting and interpreting the results of quantum measurements that are happening constantly throughout the physical world. This interpretation doesn't grant consciousness any special powers over physical reality, but it does suggest that awareness might be more intimately connected to the basic structure of information processing in the universe than we typically recognize. If this is true, then the quality of your attention and the depth of your awareness might influence which aspects of the constantly occurring measurement events you become conscious of. Take a breath here and consider how this might feel from the inside. Right now, countless quantum interactions are occurring in your brain, in your environment, in the device you're using to listen to these words. Each interaction represents a kind of measurement, a collapse from possibility into actuality. Your consciousness somehow weaves these countless micro-events into the coherent stream of experience you recognize as your subjective reality. This perspective invites a profound appreciation for the mystery of awareness itself. Every moment of conscious experience represents an almost miraculous integration of information from quantum to molecular to neural to experiential levels. The fact that this process occurs so seamlessly that you rarely think about it doesn't diminish its extraordinary nature. As our exploration deepens, it's worth considering the ethical dimensions of the ideas we've been discussing. If consciousness does have more agency in navigating reality than conventional thinking suggests, what responsibilities might this create? How do we balance the empowerment of recognizing our participatory role in shaping experience with the humility of acknowledging the limits of individual control? These questions become particularly important when considering how these ideas might be applied or misapplied in daily life. There's a persistent tendency in certain circles to oversimplify complex ideas about consciousness and reality into simplistic formulas for getting what you want. This reductive approach misses the deeper wisdom these explorations can offer, while potentially creating harmful delusions about personal responsibility and the nature of suffering. If consciousness does participate in reality selection through mechanisms we don't fully understand, this participation likely operates through subtle, long-term patterns rather than immediate cause and effect relationships. The quality of your attention, the depth of your compassion, the wisdom you cultivate over years of practice. These might influence your trajectory through possibility space in ways that are meaningful but not controllable in any direct sense. This understanding invites what we might call an ethics of possibility, a way of engaging with these ideas that remains both empowered and humble. It suggests taking responsibility for the quality of consciousness you bring to each moment, while releasing attachment to specific outcomes. It means cultivating the inner conditions that align you with beneficial possibilities, while accepting that many factors beyond your control influence what actually manifests. Perhaps most importantly, it means extending compassion to others who are navigating their own complex relationships with possibility and limitation. If we're all part of interconnected fields of consciousness, then the inner work you do to cultivate wisdom, peace, and understanding contributes not just to your own well-being, but to the collective field of awareness that surrounds and includes us all. This perspective dissolves the boundary between self-help and service to others. When you work to become more present, more compassionate, more aware, you're not just improving your own life, you're contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. This doesn't make you responsible for fixing the world or other people, but it does recognize that your inner development has implications that extend far beyond your individual experience. As you integrate these insights into your life, consider how they might inform your relationships, your work, your engagement with the challenges and opportunities that arise. How might recognizing consciousness's participatory role in reality inspire more skillful ways of living without falling into the trap of magical thinking or spiritual materialism? Let's explore something so fundamental to experience that it's almost invisible, yet it might hold the key to understanding consciousness's deepest capacities. The quality of attention itself, and how the way you attend to reality might be far more creative and influential than you've been taught to believe. Attention isn't just a spotlight that illuminates whatever you point it toward. Neuroscience reveals it as a complex, multi-layered process that actively constructs your experience of reality from the vast field of information constantly available to consciousness. What you attend to becomes foregrounded in awareness, while everything else fades into background. But this selection process isn't passive. It's creative, interpretive, and deeply influenced by your intentions, emotions, and underlying beliefs about what's important or meaningful. Different qualities of attention create qualitatively different experiences of the same situation. When you're anxious, attention becomes narrow and hypervigilant, scanning for threats and problems. This creates an experience of reality as dangerous and overwhelming, even when objectively safe conditions surround you. When you're curious and open, attention becomes spacious and receptive, noticing beauty, connection, and possibility that anxiety would completely miss. This isn't just about changing your perspective on fixed circumstances. Some interpretations suggest that different qualities of attention might actually interface with different layers of information in the quantum field, bringing different aspects of potential reality into manifestation through the very act of conscious observation. This remains speculative and unproven, but it points towards something profound about attention as a creative force rather than just a passive receptor. If consciousness does participate in reality construction through quantum mechanical processes we don't fully understand, then attention might be the primary tool through which this participation occurs. Consider how this might transform your relationship with challenging situations. Instead of seeing difficulties as fixed problems that require solutions, you might approach them as information fields that reveal different aspects depending on how you attend to them. This doesn't mean denying real challenges or pretending that positive thinking solves everything, but rather recognizing that your quality of attention influences which aspects of any situation become most apparent and accessible. The contemplative traditions have developed sophisticated practices for cultivating different qualities of attention. Mindfulness trains broad, accepting awareness that can hold whatever arises without immediately reacting. Concentration practices develop the ability to sustain focused attention on chosen objects. Loving kindness cultivation attunes attention to the possibilities for connection and care that exist in every relationship. These aren't just psychological techniques. They might represent ways of training consciousness to interface more skillfully with the quantum field of information and possibility that surrounds us always. Whether this interpretation proves accurate or not, the practical benefits of attention training remain undeniable. People who develop greater skill with attention report increased well-being, more satisfying relationships, and a greater sense of agency in navigating life's challenges. As you continue your own exploration beyond tonight, you might experiment with bringing conscious attention to the quality of attention itself. Notice when your attention becomes tight, scattered, or reactive. Practice returning to more spacious, curious, and appreciative ways of attending to your experience. Observe how these shifts in attention quality influence not just how you feel, but what you notice, what opportunities become apparent, and which possibilities seem most alive. As we approach the gentle conclusion of tonight's journey, let's consider something that might reframe everything we've explored together. The possibility that consciousness isn't trying to get anywhere or achieve anything, but rather is engaged in what we might call an infinite game of exploration and becoming. This isn't about reaching some final destination or solving the mystery of existence, but about participating ever more fully in the creative unfolding of awareness itself. Finite games are played to win, to reach conclusions, to establish final answers. Infinite games are played for the joy of playing, for the evolution and deepening that occurs through participation itself. If consciousness is engaged in an infinite game, then the goal isn't to control reality or achieve perfect understanding, but to become increasingly skillful players in the cosmic dance of possibility and actuality. This perspective dissolves many of the tensions that arise when we approach these ideas with goal-oriented thinking. You're not trying to prove that parallel universes exist or that consciousness can manipulate quantum fields. You're simply exploring what becomes possible when you engage more consciously with the mystery of awareness and its relationship with reality. Each moment offers opportunities to play more skillfully in this infinite game. When challenges arise, instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" you might ask, "How can this situation contribute to the expansion of consciousness?" When opportunities appear, instead of grasping at outcomes, you might ask, "How can I engage with this possibility in ways that serve the deepest unfolding?" This shift in perspective can transform not just how you relate to the ideas we've explored tonight, but how you approach your entire existence. Instead of seeing yourself as a separate individual trying to navigate a foreign universe, you begin to recognize yourself as consciousness exploring its own nature through the unique perspective of your particular embodiment. The parallel universes we've contemplated might exist or they might not. Consciousness might literally navigate between realities, or these experiences might reflect more conventional psychological and neurological processes. What matters isn't settling these questions definitively, but allowing them to deepen your appreciation for the mystery of existence and your creative participation within it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you're entering one of consciousness's most mysterious territories. Sleep represents a daily death and rebirth, a dissolution of ordinary identity and a re-emergence into waking awareness. If consciousness does navigate between realities, sleep might be when this navigation occurs most freely, unbound by the constraints of waking identity and rational thinking. Pay gentle attention to that liminal space between waking and sleeping, where consciousness transitions between different modes of being. Notice the quality of awareness as it shifts from focused attention to the more fluid, associative patterns of dreams. These transitions might offer glimpses into consciousness's deeper nature and its relationship with the quantum foundations of reality. As we drift deeper into these contemplative waters, let's explore something that happens billions of times each day in the most intimate theatre of your existence, yet remains largely invisible to conscious awareness. The cascade of micro-decisions that shape not just what you notice, but potentially which version of reality you inhabit from moment to moment. This isn't about the obvious choices like what to wear or where to go for lunch, but something far more subtle and perhaps more profound. Every fraction of a second, your consciousness encounters what we might call choice points. Which thought to follow among the dozens that arise, which sensation to attend to among the countless signals flowing through your nervous system, which emotion to engage with when multiple feelings compete for attention. These micro-selections happen so rapidly and automatically that they rarely register in conscious awareness, yet they may be quietly weaving the fabric of your experienced reality. Consider this. Right now, as you listen to these words, your brain is processing millions of bits of sensory information while simultaneously running background processes of memory, emotion, and anticipation. From this vast stream of data, consciousness somehow creates the coherent experience you recognize as this moment. But what determines which elements become foreground and which fade into background? What invisible intelligence is constantly curating your reality from the infinite menu of possible experiences? Some interpretations suggest that this curation process might be more creative and participatory than we typically recognize. Rather than simply reflecting a fixed external reality, consciousness might be actively selecting which aspects of the quantum field of information become actualized in your subjective experience. This remains highly speculative and lacks scientific consensus, but it offers a fascinating lens through which to examine the relationship between awareness and reality. Take a gentle breath here and notice the quality of your attention as you absorb these ideas. Can you sense the subtle choices your consciousness is making right now? The way it decides which sounds to filter out, which thoughts to pursue, which emotions to allow. This constant stream of micro-selections might be far more significant than we usually imagine. The implications ripple outward in ways that feel both empowering and humbling. If consciousness does participate in reality selection through countless micro-choices, then you might have more agency in shaping your experience than conventional thinking suggests. Not through dramatic acts of will, but through the accumulated effect of millions of tiny selections made with greater or lesser awareness. This understanding doesn't promise that you can think your way to any desired outcome, nor does it suggest that consciousness directly manipulates physical reality. Instead, it points towards something more nuanced about how awareness interfaces with the field of possibilities that surrounds us always. The quality of attention you bring to each moment might influence which aspects of that field become most accessible to your experience. Let's venture now into territory that bridges the deeply personal with the cosmically vast. The possibility that your individual process of growth and awakening doesn't occur in isolation, but rather participates in larger patterns of evolution that extend far beyond personal development. This isn't about losing your individuality in some cosmic soup, but rather about recognizing that individual consciousness might be an expression of something larger that's evolving through countless unique perspectives. Think of it like this: just as each cell in your body contributes to your overall health and functioning while maintaining its own specialized role, perhaps each conscious being contributes to the evolution of consciousness itself, while remaining utterly unique and irreplaceable. The insights you gain, the compassion you develop, the wisdom you embody, all might feed back into the larger field of awareness in ways that benefit the whole. This interpretation remains purely speculative, but it offers a profound framework for understanding the significance of inner work. If consciousness is indeed evolving through its countless expressions, then your personal journey of growth and understanding isn't just about improving your own life. It's about contributing to the expansion of awareness itself, adding your unique perspective to the grand symphony of conscious evolution. Consider how this might reframe your relationship with challenges and difficulties. Instead of seeing problems as obstacles to overcome, you might recognize them as opportunities for consciousness to explore new territories, to develop new capacities, to discover new possibilities for growth and understanding. This doesn't make difficulties easier to bear, but it can imbue them with deeper meaning and purpose. The contemplative traditions have long recognized this participatory dimension of spiritual development. When you cultivate mindfulness, you're not just improving your own mental health, you're developing a capacity that serves the collective awakening of awareness. When you practice compassion, you're not just becoming a kinder person, you're strengthening the field of love that connects all beings. Again, this remains metaphorical rather than scientifically proven, but it points towards something important about the relational nature of consciousness and its inherent drive toward greater integration, understanding, and compassion. Whether consciousness literally evolves through individual development, or whether this is simply a useful way of thinking about personal growth, the practical implications remain profound. As you reflect on your own journey of development and awakening, notice how it feels to imagine yourself as part of something larger. Does this perspective inspire greater dedication to your inner work? Does it help you find meaning in difficulties that might otherwise seem pointless? Does it shift your sense of responsibility or purpose? Now we turn our attention to the most immediate and accessible laboratory for exploring consciousness and its relationship with reality, this present moment, wherever you are, whatever you're experiencing right now. This isn't about achieving some special state or having extraordinary experiences, but rather about recognizing the profound mystery that's always available in the simple fact of being aware. Right now, without changing anything about your current experience, notice the miracle of awareness itself. Somehow, through processes we don't fully understand, the electrical and chemical activity in your brain gives rise to the subjective experience of being you. Photons hitting your retinas become the experience of seeing. Vibrations in the air become the experience of hearing. The most sophisticated computers we've ever built can process information, but they don't have subjective experiences of processing that information. Yet here you are, not just processing these words, but experiencing the meaning they convey. This everyday miracle of consciousness remains one of the deepest unsolved problems in science. We can map neural correlates of various mental states. We can predict some aspects of behavior based on brain activity, but the bridge between objective neural firing and subjective experience remains mysteriously elusive. This explanatory gap, as philosophers call it, keeps consciousness at the forefront of scientific mystery. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness might involve quantum processes in the brain, though this remains highly controversial and unproven. Other theories propose that consciousness emerges from the complex dynamics of neural networks, or that it's a fundamental feature of information processing systems. The truth is, we simply don't know how consciousness works, which means that every moment of awareness you experience is participating in one of the universe's greatest mysteries. This not knowing can be profoundly liberating. It means you don't need to understand consciousness to explore it directly through your own experience. Every moment offers opportunities to investigate awareness itself, how it expands and contracts, how it responds to different qualities of attention, how it interfaces with thoughts, emotions, and sensations. Take a moment now to turn attention toward attention itself. Notice how awareness naturally flows from object to object, thought to thought, sensation to sensation. Can you sense the space of awareness within which all experiences arise and pass away? This isn't about achieving some special meditative state, but simply about recognizing the field of consciousness that's always present, always available for exploration. This direct investigation of consciousness might be more relevant to our exploration than any theoretical framework. If consciousness does navigate between realities, if awareness does participate in selecting which possibilities become actualized, then developing greater familiarity with consciousness itself would naturally enhance your ability to engage more skillfully with these processes. As we approach the gentle culmination of our journey together, let's explore something that might transform how you engage with mystery itself. The recognition that wonder and curiosity aren't just pleasant emotions, but perhaps fundamental aspects of how consciousness interfaces with reality. The capacity to remain open to possibilities beyond current understanding might be essential to navigating the deeper mysteries we've been exploring. Wonder has a unique quality among emotions. Unlike fear or desire, which narrow attention towards specific objects or outcomes, wonder expands awareness, creating space for new possibilities to emerge. When you encounter something that evokes genuine wonder, your usual categories and explanations temporarily dissolve, leaving consciousness open to fresh perspectives and unexpected insights. This openness might be more than just psychologically beneficial. It could be functionally important for consciousness navigation. If awareness does interface with quantum fields of possibility, as some speculative interpretations suggest, then the quality of openness and curiosity might be essential for detecting subtle patterns and connections that more rigid modes of thinking would miss entirely. Think about the moments in your life when genuine wonder arose, perhaps watching a sunset that seemed to pause time itself, or contemplating the vastness of space on a clear night, or witnessing an act of unexpected kindness that restored your faith in humanity. These moments often carry a particular quality of presence and aliveness that feels qualitatively different from ordinary experience. Some interpretations suggest that wonder might represent natural states of consciousness, coherence, moments when awareness becomes more unified and less fragmented by the usual mental chatter of analysis and categorization. In these states, you might be naturally more sensitive to the subtle information patterns that normally remain below the threshold of conscious detection. This doesn't mean that wonder grants supernatural perception or that curious people can literally see parallel universes. Rather, it suggests that cultivating wonder and curiosity might enhance your sensitivity to the subtle dynamics of consciousness and its relationship with the world around you. The more comfortable you become with not knowing, the more space you create for genuine discovery. As you continue your exploration beyond tonight, consider approaching these ideas with the spirit of wonder rather than the need for certainty. The questions we've explored about consciousness, parallel universes, and reality navigation may never receive definitive answers, but the exploration itself can deepen your appreciation for the mystery of existence and your creative participation within it. Let wonder be your compass as you navigate the territories where science meets contemplation, where the known dissolves into the unknown, where consciousness encounters the deepest mysteries of its own nature. This isn't about believing in any particular theory or interpretation, but about remaining open to possibilities that expand your understanding of what it means to be aware in a quantum universe. As our gentle exploration draws toward its close, let's consider how you might integrate these ideas into your daily life without losing their essential mystery or reducing them to mere techniques for personal improvement. The concepts we've explored tonight, whether scientifically validated or purely speculative, offer invitations to engage more consciously with the profound mysteries that surround and permeate every moment of existence. Integration doesn't mean trying to apply these ideas like formulas or using them to gain control over circumstances. Instead, it means allowing them to inform your relationship with uncertainty, change, and the basic mystery of being conscious in an apparently conscious universe. This is a subtle art that requires both openness and discernment. You might begin by simply paying closer attention to the quality of your attention itself. Notice when awareness becomes tight, reactive, or scattered, and practice returning to more spacious, curious ways of engaging with experience. This isn't about achieving perfect mindfulness, but about developing greater familiarity with consciousness as a dynamic, creative process rather than a fixed thing. Pay gentle attention to synchronicities and meaningful coincidences when they arise, not as signs of supernatural intervention, but as invitations to notice the interconnected nature of existence. These moments can serve as reminders that reality might be more participatory and responsive than conventional thinking suggests, whether through quantum mechanisms or more mundane psychological processes. Notice the dreams that feel different, the ones that carry unusual clarity or impossible knowledge. Rather than trying to interpret them symbolically, simply observe them as data about consciousness's capacity to create coherent experiences from seemingly random inputs. What do they suggest about the relationship between identity and awareness when ordinary boundaries become fluid? Most importantly, cultivate comfort with not knowing. The deepest questions about consciousness and reality may remain unanswered for generations if they can be answered definitively at all. But this not knowing can be liberating rather than frustrating if you approach it with curiosity rather than the need for certainty. The mystery of consciousness isn't a problem to be solved, but a reality to be explored. Every moment of awareness, every choice you make, every dream you experience participates in this ongoing exploration. Whether you've already slipped into parallel universes without realizing it, or whether consciousness navigates reality through more conventional mechanisms, you remain an active participant in the universe's process of understanding itself. As we complete this particular journey together, it's worth recognizing that endings are also beginnings, and that the questions we've explored tonight will likely continue evolving long after these words fade into silence. The relationship between consciousness and reality remains one of science's greatest frontiers, with new discoveries in quantum mechanics, neuroscience, and contemplative research continuously expanding our understanding of what might be possible. Tonight, as we reach the gentle end of our exploration, perhaps the most profound realization isn't whether you've actually slipped into parallel universes, but rather that you've always been navigating something far more mysterious than you imagined. The simple fact of being conscious, of experiencing this moment, of wondering about the nature of reality itself, places you at the center of one of the universe's greatest puzzles. We've wandered together through quantum foundations and cosmic infinities, through dreams that might be glimpses into other timelines, and synchronicities that could be breadcrumbs from alternate selves. We've considered the possibility that consciousness might be far more participatory in shaping reality than we've been taught to believe. Whether these ideas reflect literal truth or serve as beautiful metaphors for the mystery of awareness, they invite us to approach existence with greater curiosity, deeper wonder, and more conscious participation in the unfolding of each moment. The question isn't whether you can prove you've shifted realities. The question is whether you can remain open to the profound mystery of being aware in a universe that continues to reveal new layers of strangeness and beauty. Every breath you take, every choice you make, every dream you experience participates in this ongoing exploration of consciousness, meeting itself through countless unique perspectives. As you drift into sleep tonight, you're entering one of existence's most mysterious territories. Pay gentle attention to that liminal space where ordinary identity dissolves and awareness explores realms that defy logic. Tomorrow, you might notice the subtle synchronicities and shifts with fresh eyes, not as proof of parallel universes, but as invitations to remain awake to the magic flowing through even the most ordinary moments. The universe you inhabit is far stranger and more wonderful than our ancestors could have imagined. Whether you've been quietly slipping between realities or simply discovering new depths in the one you've always called home, you remain an essential part of the cosmic story of consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature. And speaking of cosmic mysteries that reveal hidden aspects of the reality we inhabit, there's another question that connects beautifully to everything we've explored about the quantum foundations of existence. Is there a black hole next to Earth? The answer might surprise you and illuminate the invisible architecture of space-time that shapes our daily experience in ways we rarely recognize. Sweet dreams, and may consciousness guide you gently through whatever worlds await your exploration. Consciousness guide you gently through whatever worlds await your exploration.